Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the fifth lesson of Arabic grammar through the Qur'an. Today we are going to have a look at verb sentences, inshallah, after having looked first at various types of words and then phrases and then noun sentences. We spent 2 sessions on the noun sentence, and then today we look at the verb sentence. So let me share my screen, and here we are, it's the verb sentence. All right. Bismillah. Let's have a look at this. Give me a moment. There. Right. So we said earlier that if a sentence begins with a noun, usually it's a noun sentence. We're going to look at one instance today where a sentence beginning with a noun is not a noun sentence. But if it begins with a noun, it's usually a noun sentence. If it begins with a verb, it is always a verb sentence. So that's how the Arab grammarians think about it. And a verb sentence is, of course, called a jumlatun fi'liyatun, this one here. Right, so we're going to first look at the perfect verb, which in Arabic is called al-fi'lul madi, al-fi'lul madi, or in its indefinite form, fi'lun madin. To say an indefinite word or an indefinite verb, you say fi'lun madin. Right, so we have a very simple, the most simple third person perfect masculine singular verb. Sorry, the perfect third person masculine singular verb is the most simple verb in Arabic. It's just 3 letters like kataba. And as you can see, you can use it to produce what's called the simple perfect, he wrote, or the present perfect, which is he has written. It can also mean he did write as a kind of confirmation in the past. He did write. And so English has various other tenses which you create using other devices in Arabic. The verb kataba on its own can actually have all of those 3 meanings. And you'll decide which of those meanings is intended from the context. Now, in Arabic, the verb contains a pronoun. So a verb on its own contains the person who is doing the action, if the person doing the action is the pronoun contained in the verb. So within the verb kataba, there is a hidden pronoun, which is huwa, which if you manifest itself, this is called a damirun mustatirun. Mustatir means hidden. And if you manifest that pronoun, you can either put it before kataba. If you say huwa kataba, that means he wrote. Now, if you say huwa kataba, grammatically, is this a verb sentence or a noun sentence? Who's going to tell me based on what I just said to you?
Noun sentence.
A noun sentence. But if you put the huwa afterwards, if you say kataba huwa, and you put the huwa afterwards, then is that a verb sentence or a noun sentence?
A verb sentence.
A verb sentence, exactly. It's very simple. You put the huwa at the beginning, you've got huwa is your mubtada, and kataba is a verb in the place of your khabar. You've still got a mubtada and a khabar. If you put the huwa afterwards, then you've got kataba, which is your verb, and then you've got huwa, which is your fa'il, or the doer of your verb. This word fa'il in Arabic is the word for doer. Okay? So strangely, the Arab grammarians would say, if you put the huwa afterwards, they say something quite strange and interesting. They say, kataba is your verb. It's a verb sentence. Jumlatun fi'liyatun. Kataba is your verb. The fa'il is the damirun mustatirun, the hidden pronoun inside it, which is huwa. And the manifest huwa, this one, that's outside after the kataba, is called tawqid. It's just an emphasis. Yeah, so kataba huwa. He himself wrote. It's a bit like he himself, the way we re-emphasize the he with the himself. So he wrote himself. That huwa has a meaning of himself. Right. Let's look at the feminine. To make the feminine, you add this ta, which is called ta'ut ta'nifi in Arabic, the ta of feminization, literally, and that makes it she wrote, or she has written, or she did write. And in the same way, the pronoun contained in katabat is hiya. Again, it's a damirun mustatirun, it's implied or hidden. Right. Now, only those 2 contain a damirun mustatirun. Okay, the other verbs in Arabic contain what we call a damirun muttasilun, an attached pronoun, which is used to conjugate the verb. So we're going to have a look at what that looks like. So here we have the 14 persons of the verb. Let me see if I can get this all in one screen. Yeah. Yeah. So let's do this together. We used to teach this as a drill. I do not advise you to learn this as a drill. It's better to learn each of these separately and be able to access them without having to go through a drill. But if you were to say in order, you'd say kataba, he wrote, kataba, they too wrote, katabu, they plural wrote, katabat, she wrote, katabata, they too wrote. So can you see, to make the two, you just add the alif to this one or this one. Kataba, katabata. And then the feminine plural is katabna, they feminine plural wrote. Those are the third person. Second person is katabta, katabtuma, katabtum. Notice the dual in this one, in the second person, is produced by adding an alif to the plural. So you go the other way around. Yeah. So in the third person, you go from there to get that. In the second person, you go from there to get that. So it's a katabta, katabtuma, katabtum, katabti, katabtuma, katabtunna. Then I and we is katabtu, katabna. You'll be familiar with all of these. We haven't done many duals, so this middle column here is not, so hasn't been really introduced, but it's hardly ever used. And so there's a reason why we haven't emphasized it. Right. So if you have a basic verb with nothing else, then you've got a complete sentence in Arabic. You don't need anything else because the verb contains, as we said, the fa'il, the doer. An action and the person doing the action is your complete sentence, because the person doing your action is your subject, and then the thing you're attributing to them is the action denoted by the verb. In just the same way that in a noun sentence, your mubtada is your subject, that's the person, that's the noun, that's the backbone of your sentence, and the attribute to the noun is the khabar. Yeah. And if you put the noun first and the khabar is a verb, then the attribute in that instance is actually also a verb. All the verb sentence does is it takes the verb, which would have been the khabar in a noun sentence, and it brings it to the front so that the attribute is effectively coming before the subject. But in substance, in a noun sentence and a verb sentence, you're effectively doing the same thing. You have a concrete noun and an attribute that's either a noun or a verb. So for example, if you say huwa, so if you say qara'a, then qara'a is a verb and the fa'il is the implied pronoun huwa, the dhamirun mustatirun. Qara'at, implied pronoun is here. In this verb jalasu, going back up here, I've made the pronouns used to conjugate some of these verbs red. Okay, so the only two verbs that don't conjugate with a pronoun are kataba and katabat. All of the others conjugate. The word conjugate in English means the change you have to make to a verb for when a different person is doing the action. So all of these are different persons, singular, duals, and plurals. Okay, masculine, feminine, and the first persons are the same for the masculine and feminine. All right, so for all of these different persons, a number of people, we conjugate the verb. So the verb is conjugated in the duals and the plurals in the third person, and all of the other cases it's conjugated by attaching a pronoun. So this alif is actually a dhamir, it's a pronoun. This waw is a pronoun. This tum, these second person ones are easy because you just take the pronoun off of the detached pronoun. From anta, you get the ta. From anti, you get the ti. From antuma, you get the tuma. From antum, you get the tum, and so on. And so the second persons are actually probably the easiest. So we have a verb sentence without a noun subject, with a pronoun subject. You can also, of course, have a verb sentence with a noun subject. So you could say kataba rajulun. So now the fa'il is no longer that implied huwa. The implied huwa is actually still there because it's kind of attached to the verb kataba. All right, so the implied pronoun is still hidden inside there, but the functional fa'il or the doer in this sentence is the word rajulun, and as we've learned, the doer ends with default dhamma. Okay, so you say kataba rajulun, and of course, if you took the rajulun and put him here, if you say rajulun kataba or ar-rajulu kataba, then you'll of course have a noun sentence. Same here, jalasa ar-rajulu, the man sat. The ar-rajulu is the fa'il. كتبت امرأة. Imra'atun is a woman. And notice katabat has become katabati. This kasra is a liaison vowel, which we apply to katabat when it's followed by hamzatul wasl. Okay, because the hamzatul wasl here results in actually three sukoons in a row here. So the sukoon there, sukoon on the alif, and the sukoon on the mim. So to get from the ta to the mim, you need a liaison vowel. And in this verb, it's always a kasra. Right, now, when the fa'il comes after the verb, so when the verb is first, i.e. it's a verb sentence, and the fa'il comes after it, then the verb always stays singular. This was one of the difficult things that I found when I was learning, because for an English speaker, it's counterintuitive. In English, we conjugate, or we'd expect to conjugate the verb as English speakers, where the person doing action is plural. But actually, you have to keep it singular. So you'd say, kataba rijalun. Okay? Jalasa ar-rijalu. Katabat nisa'un. Jalasatin nisa'u. However, if the verb comes after the subject, so for example, you might say something like, the students read and understood, then you say, the first verb will stay singular, qara'a, and then you have a plural subject, plural fa'il. And then now if you have another verb here, which refers back to this, that has to now agree in plurality or duality. So you say, قَرَأَ الطُّلَّابُ وَفَهِمُوا. Make this one plural. From an example, جَلَسَتِ النِّسَاءُ. The women sat, عَلَى الْأَرْضِ وَقَرَأْنَا. And they read. جَلَسَ الرِّجَالُ وَالنِّسَاءُ. So this example here is where you have a mixed group of people doing an action, so men and women are doing it, you keep the verb at the beginning, masculine singular. Right, now let's look at the maf'ulun bihi. The maf'ulun bihi is the object of the verb. And the object of the verb, as we know, wants to go up. It wants to end in a fatha. So we have here, he read. So now we've got our verb sentence, our jumla fi'liya is this qara'a. This al-kitaba, the maf'ulun bihi, is not part of the jumla, right? Because the Arabs make the distinction between what they call the jumla and what they call the fadla. The fadla is everything else outside the jumla that just adds meaning. So for example, if I say qara'a fil kitabi, you read in the book, qara'a fil kitabi, excuse my handwriting. So qara'a fil kitabi, this fil kitabi is what we said, it's a shibul jumla, and the shibul jumla is outside the main jumla. The main jumla here is qara'a, and the shibhul jumla is here attached to the verb qara'a, but it's not part of the jumla. Okay? In the same way, the maf'ulun bihi is not part of the jumla. So we have another example, katabat kalimatan, she wrote a word, qara'tumul kitaba, you wrote or you read the book. Notice that when you say qara'tum, followed by hamzatul wasl, again we need a little liaison vowel here, qara'tumul kitaba. That's easier for you to see. Yeah. So here we have qara'tumul kitaba, fahimtul kalama. The object goes up. Right. So far we've had a sentence structure which we may call the verb, the subject, and the object. Fi'lun, fa'ilun, maf'ulun bihi. This is the VSO order. VSO, verb, subject, object. So we have qara al-waladul kitaba. The boy read the book. That's V, that's S, that's O. Qara al-waladul kitaba. Katabat imra'atun kalimatan. A woman wrote a word. Kataba al-rijalu jumalan. The men wrote sentences. Fahimatin nisa'ul kalama. The women understood the speech. Now, when the maf'ulun bihi, when the object is a pronoun, yeah, then we use a dhamirun muttasilun, not a dhamirun munfasilun. So we have here qara'ahu. So if we take a simple verb sentence with a pronoun subject, yeah, qara'a, and then we attach the object to it, we just say qara'ahu, he read it. So let me ask you a question. How many pronouns are there in this sentence?
2.
Say again, nice and loud.
2.
2. Okay, what's the first one?
قرأ
He.
هو.
He.
Good. So there's a huwa. There's an implied huwa inside the qara'a, yeah? And then what's the second pronoun?
هو again.
Who.
It's who, not a huwa. It's a who. It's an attached pronoun. Okay? So we say qara'ahu. The first pronoun is the fa'il, huwa. The second pronoun is the maf'ulun bihi, who. Okay? Same thing here. Fahima na. Fahima na. Now I want you to think carefully. What's the difference between fahimna and fahimana? The difference is in the pronunciation of this fatha. The meaning is completely different. Fahimana means the verb sentence is complete here. He understood. Na, us. But if you say fahimna, that means we understood. That's it. Where this na is the pronoun. Katabathu, she wrote it. Fahimtu ka, I understood you. Fahimtu is the verb, and then the ka is your object. Right. So in this sentence, how many pronouns are there?
2.
2. What's the first one?
Two.
The tu, good, which means I. Yeah, this tu means I. And then the second one is the ka, which means you. I understood you. There we go. So we've actually got 3 words in that construct. Right. Look at a bit of morphology. When you attach the first person pronoun to a verb, then you have to add this noun, which we call noonul wiqaya. It protects the verb from the ya, because the ya requires the letter before it to have a kasra. If you didn't have the noon, think about it. If your noon wasn't there, you'd have to put a kasra on this meme and say fahimi, which would distort the actual verb. It would no longer mean he understood, because he understood is fahima. So in order to protect the verb from this ya, we introduce an extra noon here called the noonul wiqaya. Noonul wiqaya. Wiqaya means protection. Noonul wiqaya protects this verb from this ya. We're going to look at some verses of the Qur'an where there's an interesting twist to this noon. So let's watch out for that later, inshallah. Right, so here we have, they read the book, right? So that's straightforward. The verb looks normal here. And this is your maf'ulun bihi. Okay, so now, tell me how many pronouns there are in this sentence.
1.
Good. Where is it?
That's the
Wow. Wow.
That's good. It's this plural wow. Yeah, it's that plural wow. That's the pronoun. That's called wawul jama'ati, the wow of the group, the wow of the plural. Right. Now, what happens when you attach a pronoun to that verb is this alif has to drop. So you say qara'u hu, you drop the alif. There's no alif there. Okay, so that's a spelling point. Next, this one, fahimtum. If you have an al after it, you have the next word, the object of the verb, for example, that's got an al, then you need that liaison vowel. I showed you an example of that above. So you say fahimtumul kutuba, you understood the books. Now, watch what happens when you attach a pronoun to it. If you say fahimtumha, say that, fahimtumhu, fahimtumhu. Say that. Fahimtumhu, fahimtumha. Does it sound a bit sort of cut off near the end? It doesn't flow. Fahimtumhu. See that? Fahimtumhu. So because Arabs don't like that sort of the jarring sort of sound near the end of that word, we introduce, to lubricate it, to make it smooth, we introduce this wow on this second person masculine plural verb, which ends in tum. Fahimtumuhu. Okay, so if qara'tum means you read, how would I say you read it? Qara'tum
قرأتموه.
قرأتموه. You've got to add that wow. All right. Let's do another one. زرتم. You visited. Let's say you visited him.
زرتموه.
زرتموه.
زرتموه. Good. أكلتم means you ate. Say you ate it.
أكلتموه.
أكلتموه. Good. All right. So let's just practice that a few times. We haven't done this really. It's not very common actually, but because you don't really usually speak to a group of people telling them that they've done something to something with a pronoun. It's not a very common expression. Right. Right, Rupan is here. So shall we take a short break? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back. Let me share my screen. There we are. Right. So what happens when you have a verb with an attached pronoun, such as qara'ahu, and then you want to state your fa'il? So you can, of course, either put him after, in which case you get this verb object subject structure, which you can't really derogate from here. So you would say qara'ahu, the object has to go in the middle now. The maf'ulun bihi is the hu, and then the fa'il is al-waladu. Of course, you could put al-walad at the beginning, in which case you've got a noun sentence, a jumla ismiya. Here are a few more examples. Katabaha ar-rijalu, the men wrote them, the ha referring to the them. Katabathu imra'atun, actually you don't need this kasra here. You say katabathum imra'atun, a woman wrote it. Fahimat kumun nisa'u. Excuse the simplicity of the examples. I'm just trying to keep the examples simple. And I'm just using boys, girls, men and women, not men's, men and women in the examples, right? So they're not very meaningful, but they're simple. Fahimat kumun nisa'u, the women understood you.
Ustad, in these examples, the verbs are all singular, but when we attach the pronoun without a fa'il, they were plural in some situations. So does it come back if there's no subject stated?
Exactly. So I'm going to come to that in a bit. So going back where we have there, fahimtumuha, that's the second person, you understood it. The verb is plural here because there is no stated subject, that's a separate subject, that's the noun. Okay, so examples I gave earlier, same as here, qara'uhu, they read it. You wouldn't say qara'uhu ar-rijalu. So if I want to say the men read it, yeah, and I said qara'uhu ar-rijalu, this would be wrong. Yeah. Having said that, there was apparently one tribe in classical Arabia who did do that, and their language is popularly known as lughatu akaluhum al-baraghith. Akaluhum al-baraghith. The fleas ate them. Al-baraghithu means the fleas. The language is called the fleas ate them because this expression, the fleas ate them, encapsulates two anomalies existent in that dialect, which is they don't keep the verb singular before a plural subject. So they say akaluhum, and then they say al-baraghith, and of course al-baraghith is a irrational plural, but they treat it as though it's masculine plural. They don't treat it as feminine singular. So the two things that they do that are different is they don't keep the verb at the beginning singular, and they don't treat irrational non-human plurals as feminine singular. So their language is called akaluhum al-baraghith, but this language is rare. It's not the standard Fusha Arabic, if you like. It's just one of the anomalous usages within one of the tribes in classical Arabia. Otherwise, this is, for our purposes, incorrect. You cannot say qara'uhu ar-rijalu. You'd have to say, what would you say? The men read it. What would you say?
Qara'ahu.
Good. You'd keep the verb singular. You'd say qa, ra, a, u. Qara'ahu, and then you'd say ar-rijalu. You keep the verb singular. Qara'ahu ar-rijalu, like this.
أستاذ عندي سؤال.
نعم تفضل.
لا في قرأه الولد, which we mentioned before, or later on in the book. you said, and you said at the beginning of the lesson as well, if you put the subject at the beginning, then it becomes a noun sentence. But does it hold the same meaning?
But
Does it hold the same meaning?
yes, the meaning is essentially the same.
Okay.
The meaning is not different.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So here we have katabaha ar-rijalu, the men wrote them. Katabathu kumra'atun, and so on. So again, these are kept singular because you have the fa'il as a noun. Okay. Where the fa'il is an implied or an attached pronoun, then you'd make it plural. Right. So as you can see here, this pronoun here is your maf'ulun bihi, as is this one. These are all directly attached, and we saw examples earlier where the maf'ulun bihi is a noun. For example, kataba kitaban, he wrote a book, kitaban being a separate noun. Now, those are what we call direct objects. All right. So when a verb is able to take a direct object, which will make go up with a fatha usually, that verb is called muta'addin. You say fi'lun muta'addin. In English, we call it transitive. And there are some verbs that are intransitive. They are what we call lazim. And those verbs, they require a preposition before their object. So their objects will essentially be part of a shibhul jumla with a harful jar. All right, let's have a look at some examples. So if the verb jalasa, to say he sat on the ground, you can't just say jalasa al-arda. You can't say, if you say jalasa al-arda, that's incorrect. You have to say jalasa al-ardi. So this verb is lazim, it's intransitive, it cannot take a direct object. Another example is kharaja. Kharaja, right? He went out of, how do you say he went out of the house? Kharaja?
من البيت.
البيت.
Good, so you have to use it with a min, right? So you say minal bayti, right? So these verbs are called lazim. And those other ones we saw earlier are called muta'addin. Right, let's have a quick look at how we negate the fi'lun madin. It's negated usually with a ma. So you say ma kataba Muhammadun kitaban, or ma katabu. All right. We also learned that you can actually create the same meaning with lam, but with lam, do you use a perfect verb or an imperfect verb?
Imperfect verb.
Good. So you say lam yak.
يكتب.
Good. Lam yaktub, and you put a sukoon. This is called majzoom. So you say lam yaktub. That has the same meaning as ma kataba. Right. Let's have a look at how we
Does
can.
it have the same meaning?
Yes, the two are both simple parts. So you say
So
ma
ma
kataba.
kataba is like forever, right? And lam yaktub, it's because I remember once I said I didn't finish, and you corrected me not to use ma but to use lam. Sorry.
But I may have said lam because you're saying lam antahi. You can't say
Lam akmal.
lam
akmal.
ukmil. Lam ukmil. Yeah.
I
So-
said ma akmaltu.
Good. So if you say ma akmaltu, that's the same meaning as lam ukmil. If I told you otherwise, I'm sorry.
Okay,
retract
I
it.
understood that. If you say ma, it means you've finished, like you didn't finish throughout time. But if you say lam, it's like, oh, I just didn't finish in this instance.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up. I will check that. Okay. Al-fi'lu al-madi. Let's emphasize that. Qad, the particle qad is an emphatic particle. Sometimes it's doubly emphasized with a lam. So we say laqad. And you place this before the perfect verb and it emphasizes it. It's usually used to dispel doubt. So for example, if Maryam says to Hassan, هل قرأت هذا الكتاب? Have you read this book? حسن نعم قد قرأته. Yes, so he's going to use one emphasis because he's feeling that Maryam is doubting him. So again, it's all about context. Because he feels she's doubting him, he's going to use قد قرأته. And then she says لا, she's actually not, it's gone beyond doubt now, she's denying, she's disagreeing with him. ما قرأت شيئا من هذا الكتاب. And he says, now he's going to use the double emphasis because it's gone beyond doubt, it's gone to denial. And to dispel the denial, he says, لقد قرأت كل هذا الكتاب. Okay, so here we have the use of the qad and the laqad. Now, qad and laqad are often used to create what we call the present perfect. So here we've got I have read the book, and here, because I've used the word indeed, I translate it as did, but you could think of it as I have indeed, because the word have in English gives you the present perfect. It's a kind of complete action all the way up to now. It's more emphatic than I read. Okay, so qad is often translated or used when you're translating the present perfect into Arabic. Arab translators like to use the qad to render the present perfect into Arabic. Right. The other thing is nothing should go between qad and the fi'l. So you don't say qad ma qara'ta. Right? So if you're negating the verb, you don't put qad before that. So qad has to go straight into the verb. You can't have anything in between. Right, let's have a look at word order. So we've encountered the verb subject object. That's a typical example. We've done the verb object subject, which happens when the object is a pronoun attached to the verb and then the subject comes after. There's another situation where you can have a verb object subject structure, even though the object isn't a pronoun. And this happens when the fa'il, the doer, is indefinite. So instead of saying كتب رجل الكتاب, can you see here? You have to either stop كتب رجل الكتاب, or you have to do something quite wonderful, which is add an extra noun here and say كتب رجل الكتاب, which is a bit extra, it's a bit mealy mouthed. كتب رجل الكتاب. Yeah. But to avoid that, we can simply switch these two, and then you get the harmony. كتب الكتاب رجل. So you put the fa'il now at the end, particularly when it's indefinite, yeah, for stylistic reasons. You can still put a definite fa'il here if you want to emphasize the object, because the word you put earlier will obviously have more emphasis in your sentence. So if you want to emphasize your object, you say كتب الكتاب, and then you can have الرجل here, and you do that for rhetorical effect. You say الرجل. But when it's indefinite, it's just stylistically more elegant to have the rajulun at the end. For example, this also happens when the word is definite, but it's got a tanween, like a proper noun. So you say كتب الكتاب حسن rather than كتب حسن الكتاب. Right, now let's have a look at putting the object right at the beginning. So Arabic doesn't really have any strictures on where you can put the object. You could actually even put the object right at the beginning and say literally a book did Hassan write. A book did write Hassan. That's the word structure. A book did write Hassan. Kitaban kataba Hassanun. When you do that, guess, is this a noun sentence or a verb sentence?
I think it's still a verb.
Noun.
Verbs.
This is the situation when even though you started with a noun, because this is not really part of your sentence. Remember that? When I told you the maf'ulun bihi is not part of your jumla. It's outside your jumla. It's an extra bit of information, because the basic jumla is kataba
Hasanun.
hasanun. Yeah. So this is still a noun sentence. The jumla is still a jumla ismiya. The kitaban is just the maf'ulun bihi, which has been brought to the beginning. Maf'ulun bihi muqaddam.
Sorry, you mean verbal.
This is a verb. Sorry, afwan. This is a verb sentence, not a noun sentence. Kataba is the first word of the sentence. So this is still a verb sentence, and the kitaban is just the maf'ulun bihi that's been brought forward. Right, let's have a look at this structure. I've been mentioning it quite a lot, putting the subject right at the beginning. If you bring ar-rajulu to the beginning, You've now got a noun sentence. So what do we have? We've got, where's the mubtada?
الرجل
Good. Ar-rajul is your mubtada. And where's your khabar?
كتب.
Good. Kataba is your khabar. So the grammarians have a lovely way to parse these sentences, which some Arabic students find the bane of their lives. I've seen students really struggle parsing Arabic sentences. But as we get into advanced grammar later, not now, not in level 7, 8, and 9, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you parse a sentence. So they'll say something like, كتب فعل ماض مبني على الفتح. So this is فعل ماض, a perfect verb. It's fixed on the fatha, كتب. في محل means in the place of. في محل رفع. The word رفع in Arabic is what they call the default. They call that the default case. They call it رفع. So it's in the في محل رفع. Why is it in the في محل رفع? Because it's in the place of the khabar, which if it were a noun would have a dhamma on it, wouldn't it? Yeah. So if I said الرجل كاتب, right? That's a similar meaning. The man is a writer. الرجل كاتب, that's your noun sentence. And the kataba is really just doing the same job as the word katibun. So this word katibun is marfu'un. It has the rafa' and you can see it visibly. But the word kataba is fi mahalli. It's in the place of this word, which is in the rafa' position. All right. Don't worry too much about all of that. That's all technical, grammatical, grammar speak, if you like. You don't need to know any of that in order to speak Arabic. If you ask the Sahaba to tell you the i'rab of this sentence, they'll say, "What are you talking about?" They wouldn't actually understand what you mean if you say fi mahalli rafa', because they never thought about grammar in that way. All right, which is why I sometimes lament when beginner Arabic students, way before their time, are exposed to this stuff, because it just throws them off, and I've seen it cause long-term harm to some people. I only learned that stuff when I was fluent and conversant in Arabic. I was able to go into a lesson and study fiqh and in Arabic medium and speak to the teacher in Arabic. Only after that point did I learn i'rab as an advanced, and I learned it in Arabic. He taught me i'rab in Arabic medium. I do not believe people who can't speak Arabic yet or properly should be studying i'rab. It's damaging. They should be learning how to speak Arabic first. Right. Now, just beware that even though we call this the mubtada and we say this is a noun sentence, in terms of meaning, of course, it is the doer of that verb, isn't it? Yeah? Because we say ar-rajulu kataba, the kataba is still being attributed to the man. So he's still doing the action. And in Arabic, we call this fa'ilun ma'nawiyyun. It is a semantic fa'il. It's still the fa'il of the verb, not grammatically, but semantically in terms of meaning, it's the doer. Now, for those of you who are English speakers, the subject, verb, object is the easiest structure because it's the structure we use in English. Okay, so if people find verb sentences hard in Arabic, my advice to them is start off with this structure, but over time, learn the VSO, putting the verb first, because in some situations it's considered to be rhetorically stronger to put the verb first. And as an Arabist, you must be able to put the verb first and recognize it when it's put first, because it's all over the Arabic language. Okay.
So if we learn the first like SVO, then we would have to know the plural verbs, right?
That's also true. That's also true. So every structure has its pitfall. So this verb, subject, object, the compensation for learning how to put the verb first is that you can keep the verb singular. All right? Well pointed out. Right, let's have a look at the imperfect verb. Al-fi'lul mudari'u. Al-fi'lul mudari'u. The word mudari' in Arabic actually means something that is similar. And the reason why we call al-fi'lu al-mudari'u mudari'u is because, just as I've explained, I'm going to explain it in a bit, the imperfect verb is able to be expressed using an active participle, ismul fa'il. And so because it's so similar to the ismul fa'il, because both are in kind of the present tense, yeah? So the ismul fa'il, if I say, ana hadirun, I am present, and I say, أحضر, I'm attending, I'm being present. The meaning of those two is very, very similar. And so because of that similarity, we call the imperfect verb al-fi'lul mudari'u, literally the similar verb. Similar to what? Similar to the ismul fa'il. So how do we do this? We start off with the simple third person, yaktubu. As you can see, there's actually more options in this in terms of translation. He is writing, continuous present. He writes, habitual. He will write, future. He can write, ability. So this has a lot of potential in terms of how you translate this. Just that yaktubu, you don't need anything else to produce these four meanings. All right, this just explains how to produce that. To conjugate the imperfect verb, we change the letter at the beginning with either a noun, a hamza, a ya, or a ta. All right, and those four words make up this verb na'aytu, which is actually in the Qur'an. Wa na'a bijanibi, and he took shelter near it. Wa na'a bijanibi. So na'aytu, this word is actually in the Qur'an. This word encapsulates or produces a formula for those four letters: nun, alif, ya, and ta. So if you ever hear somebody say na'aytu, then in relation to grammar, they're talking about these four letters, talking about nun, the hamza, the ya, and the ta. See, those ones I put in green. Those are the prefixes we add to the al-fi'l al-mudari' to conjugate it. Right? They don't. These letters are not the pronoun which I've made red. Okay, so these are the attached pronouns. So once again, huwa, hiya, and anta. In the case of the imperfect, these three. In the perfect, it was only these two. In the imperfect, these three do not have an attached pronoun to conjugate it. The pronoun's implied. So in yaktubu, huwa is implied. In taktubu, hiya is implied. In taktubu, anta is implied. Right? In all of the others, the pronoun is the alif or the waw or the nun for the feminine plural, or the waw for the masculine plural, and this ya for the feminine singular, second person. All right? Sorry, I was wrong. These two also have implied pronouns. So ana is the pronoun here, and nahnu is the implied pronoun there. So here there's 5 of these verbs that have damirun mustatirun, an implied pronoun.
Could you say that that's because you can't have a normal noun as the subject for those ones? Oh, actually, you could. Well, I guess it's only the bottom two. You couldn't have a normal
noun. Yeah, you could have it for these two.
Have for those two.
Third person, yeah. So you can only really have a noun subject for third person verbs, right? You can't have a separate noun subject for second and first person. It's obvious why. If I say I am writing, you can't have a noun for that because it's I'm doing it, right? If you want to have a noun, you'd say the man is writing. You've gone to third person. You see, you are writing. I can't say you, the man, are writing. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, you say the man is writing. You've gone to third person. So the sentences where you're going to get a subject being a noun separate to the verb are only third person verb sentences. Okay, let's just have a quick look at the conjugation of it. So you have yaktubu, yaktubani, yaktubuna, taktubu, taktubani, yaktubna. Yeah, so here for the feminine, we had to change this ya back to this ta for the feminine, change it back to a ya because otherwise you'll get confused with this one, the second person. So second person, you have taktubu, taktubani, taktubuna, taktubina, taktubani, taktubna, naktubu, naktubu.
For the translation where you're saying, for example, he is writing versus he writes, does the context make it absolutely clear which it is? I'm just thinking for like tafsir purposes, is that a clear-cut situation?
The context will either make it clear or it may be deliberately ambiguous in order to render all of those potential meanings. Or the author just may not have realized and it's not deliberately ambiguous. It's just ambiguous. Yeah. Okay. And then it's open to interpretation. So we have here now the verb has different permutations in terms of how you vowel it. So where in the perfect verb you have fatha, fatha, fatha. See these three verbs, you have fatha, 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 right? You can have dhamma, kasra, or fatha in the imperfect. And there's no way of knowing this. You can't work this out. You have to learn it for each verb you learn. So you learn kataba, yaktubu, the dhamma here. Jalasa, yajlisu, qara'a, yaqra'u. So where it's fatha, 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 you're going to get these three options. You also have fatha, kasra, fatha. Okay. Now, 99% of the time, or maybe 98, or maybe 95, I'm not sure, but a very high percentage of the time, where you have fatha, kasra, fatha, you'll have fatha in the imperfect. So if you see this and you don't know this, you take a guess. What's your guess?
It's fatha.
Yeah, you bank on fatha. Yeah. If it was a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question, you'd bank on the fatha. You say fahima yafhamu, even if you don't know. So let me give you some examples. So if I say some examples. If I say hasiba, how would you make the imperfect?
يحسب
Yahsabu. Good. Yahsabu. If I say arija, arija,
يرجع
ya,
Yeah.
ya'raju.
Oh,
Good.
sorry.
Yeah, there's another verb, araja ya'ruju. That's this one. That's this one, right? This is arija ya'raju, a slightly different meaning. Okay, araja ya'ruju means to rise. Arija ya'raju means to limp. Two different meanings, very similar verbs, but different meanings. Okay. And then you also have fatha, dhamma, fatha. Whenever you have that, it's always dhamma in the middle. So kabura, yakburu. He grew, he is growing. So if I said to you, kabira, what would you do for the imperfect?
Yakbaru.
Yakbaru. Good. So kabura, yakburu. This one means he grew in. Everybody knows. He grew in size. You know, he grew up, became a bigger person. Whereas kabira yakbaru means he grew, yes, in
age.
age, yes. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? That's the same word, but slightly different voweling gives you a slightly different meaning. So be careful. Okay, so there's three of these. There's six of these in Arabic. There's these three. Then there's this one. That's five. And then there's this one, hasiba. And hasiba, so hasiba is the same as fahima, right? So we know I said 99% of the time it's going to be fatha. The other 1% of the time it's going to be kasra. So you have hasiba yahsibu. Interestingly, with this verb, you also have yahsabu. Both are allowed with this one. So this particular verb is both of the fahima yafhamu type and of the hasiba yahsibu type.
So the kasra means considered and the fatha means?
The same meaning.
Was it accounted or something like this?
Yeah, so to take something into account, to consider, it's all the same, the connected meanings. Yeah. So interestingly, in the Quran, you only have yahsabu, you don't have yahsibu. So the Quran does not use yahsibu, it uses the yahsabu option. So you have these six permutations within this form of the verb. And
so Ustad, if he said he did the accounts, would it still be hasiba or hasaba?
Hasiba.
Hasiba.
The verb is hasiba. Right. Okay, let's move on. Right, how do you negate the imperfect verb? You negate it with a la yaqra'u Muhammadun, or la afhamu. I don't understand. So the basic negation of the verb is la. However, as I've told you before, you can also negate the imperfect verb with the ma. And this is replete in the Quran. It appears many, many times in the Quran where we negate an imperfect verb with a ma. Okay. You can also negate it with a laysa. You could say laysa yaqra'u. He doesn't read. He cannot read.
Well, you
Right?
couldn't negate a verb with laysa. You can actually use that, can you?
Yeah. So you're using laysa to negate this. Yeah. You can use ma, laysa, or la to negate the verb. So if I say aqra'u, how would I say I can't read using la?
لا أقرأ.
La aqra'u, good. Say I can't read using ma.
لا أقرأ.
Ma aqra'u. Say I can't read using laysa.
ليس أقرأ.
Ah,
لست
yeah. Lastu.
Good.
Yeah. So if you're going to use a laysa, you have to conjugate it. Lastu aqra'u.
Okay.
All right. So if I say la adri, I don't know. You say ma, I don't know.
لا أدري.
Ma adri. Say I don't know using laysa.
ليس
أدري.
لست أدري
لست أدري.
Lastu adri. Yeah. So I like that one. I throw that out sometimes. You know, sometimes when you want to really emphasize something, you use an expression that people don't often hear. That really sort of wakes them up. So I like to say lastu adri instead of la adri to people, and they think, oh, okay, he really doesn't know.
Yeah, we've never
Yeah.
used this. We've always been saying la adri.
Yeah, so la adri is fine. That's the ordinary way. You can say ma adri. You can say lastu adri if you really want to put your foot down about it. La lastu adri. Yeah. Right, future tense. We've done this. You put a sa or a sofa. Of course, you don't need those. So context can also tell you whether the verb is perfect, whether the verb is future. One thing you shouldn't do though is don't say sofa or sa if you're negating the verb. So you don't say sofa la. You don't say sofa la adhabu. That's not allowed. So you have to just say la adhabu. Or how else can you make it definitely future? Negation.
لم
All right.
لن.
Somebody's saying lam. Is it lam we're looking for?
or
لن.
لن.
Lan.
Lan. Yeah. So if you can use lan, and what does lan do to the verb?
Throws it into future.
Go up.
Goes up.
Makes it go up. Good. So if I said la adhabu, I won't go. How would I say lan? Lan.
لن
لن
أذهب.
أذهب.
Lan adhaba. Good. Good. Let's do the second person. Lan tadhaba. Make it feminine.
Lan
لن
tadhhab.
تذهبي.
Lan tadhabi. Good. Drop the noon. Make it plural.
Lan
لن
tadhhab.
تذهبوا.
Lan tadhabu. Drop the noon and
Right.
لن
أنا
تذهبن.
تبدأ
write an alif. Write an alif. Yes. Drop the noon. Write an alif. Feminine plural. Lan.
تذهبن.
Yes.
Lan tadhhabna. Good. That feminine plural noun doesn't drop. Right. What happens if you? Yes.
What's the difference between sa and sofa? Is there a difference?
There's a big discussion about this among the scholars, and the upshot is they don't really know. And some
It's the near
say,
future, isn't it?
some say that sa is near future and sofa is later future. Some say it's the opposite, and some say no, they're interchangeable. So there's no outcome from that discussion. Okay.
You can
So
also
the qad.
we also do the akulu, right? With the verb, same as kuntu with the verb in the past.
Your sound is very low. I couldn't hear you.
Can we also project to the future by using akunu?
Ah. Yes. So yes. So if you say akunu, so we did kuntu. If you say kuntu, that transports to the past, all right? So if I say kuntu dhahabtu, so the verb dhahabtu is already past, isn't it? That means I went, right? Kuntu dhahabtu means, so dhahabtu means I went. So if I want to transport, can I transport that even further into the past? Can you have a past of a past?
Yes,
Perfect.
How?
I had went. I had went.
I had I had gone.
I had
Yeah.
gone.
Yes. So why would you say that I had gone? You had gone in relation to what?
Since the moment back then, you'd gone before that.
Yes. There's two things happening, and both are in the past. So when he arrived, so he arrived. That's the first. That's the second event. I had already gone. Okay. So I would say, how to say when?
عندما.
متى إذا.
So let's say عندما, or we could say إذا. Mata is more for questions, so let's just use عندما or إذا, or we also say لما. لما also means when. So لما وصل, when he arrived. كنت ذهبت, I had gone. You see, so this creates what we call a pluperfect. So you can use kana to transport a perfect verb further into the past. Pluper. I heard one of you say that earlier. Right. If we use kuntu or any of the versions of kana with an imperfect verb, kuntu adhabu, what does that give us?
I was going.
Past continuous.
I was going, past continuous. Kuntu adhabu, I was going. عندما وصل كنت أذهب. When he arrived, I was going. Right? So he's caught you in the act of going. كنت أذهب, past continuous. Now for future, you can do basically the same thing. So let me show you what happens for future. Exactly the same principle. I'm going to just delete the kuntu and put akunu here. And you're going to tell me what the meanings are. Whoops, sorry. Take these out. All right, take these out. I'm not going to use them now. There we go. So we have akunu. If I say akunu, dhahabtu, what do you think that would mean?
Is that I will have gone?
Exactly. It's a future perfect. Yeah. So akunu dhahabtu will be a future perfect. Akunu dhahabtu. And akunu adhabu is very rare. You wouldn't really need to do it because you'd just say, I will be going. Akunu adhabu, I will be going. We do it in English. Arabs don't use that one much. But that's effectively the kind of meaning you'd be producing if you say akunu adhabu. Okay? So here you can see akunu, kana and yakunu is a really, really useful time machine to transport verbs into the past, both perfect and imperfect verbs into the past, into the future, to help you create tense. Maliha, tafaddali.
In level 3, we did akunu najihan. Why does that go up? Or is it?
But those are when you're using akunu to transport a noun sentence. We are using kana and yakunu here with verbs, not noun sentences.
How is it a noun sentence?
So if you say ana najihun,
Yes.
Yes,
ana najihun, that's your noun sentence.
Yes.
Yeah? And then if you say I was successful, say kuntu. Kuntu already has the pronoun tu, right? So you don't need the ana anymore.
Yes.
So say kuntu or akunu najihan, because it makes the khabar go up, right?
Yes.
When you use it with verbs, the verbs don't go up or down, okay? The verbs are insulated from the kana and the yakunu. So don't say kuntu adhaba. Some of you were making this mistake. You'd say kuntu adhabu, kuntu a'malu. I was working. You see? Yes. We did that even in level 1, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah, or level 2.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Any more questions?
So Ustad, is akunu adhabu the future continuous?
Yeah, kind of. Although I don't advise you use it because it just sounds weak. You don't hear Arabs speaking like that.
Just for the purpose of comparing it to the kuntu adhabu, I just wanted to just in comparison. I know we don't use it, but in comparison, that's what we're basically saying, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, I will be going. Future continuous.
Ustad, you would never have akunu sa'adhabu just to emphasize.
No. No. You wouldn't say akunu sa'adhabu. All right. Now, what happens when?
Question. You know, in the present tense, is there a difference between I am not reading and I don't read?
I don't read. So la aqra'u can mean both.
Okay.
لا أقرأ, the expression لا أقرأ can mean both. And I cannot read, you could render slightly differently. You could say, I am not a reader. لست قارئا. You see? So you could use this اسم الفاعل قارئ, which means a reader. لست قارئا وما أنا قارئا. I'm not a reader, using لست or ما. Okay. All right. Now, what happens when you put this emphatic particle qad before an imperfect verb? Now, of course, qad emphasizes a perfect verb because it's perfect. So what do you think it will emphasize with an imperfect verb? Will it emphasize its imperfection? Yes. So qad makes the yaktubu maybe into a maybe meaning. So qad yaktubu means he may write. So how would I say I might go tomorrow?
قد أذهب غدا.
Yeah. قد أذهب غدا. قد أذهب غدا. That's it. So you don't need any other word to produce a meaning of might or may. All right. Now be slightly careful here. In the Qur'an, qad is used with imperfect verbs not to mean might or may, but with the meaning it renders with the perfect verb. So qad ya'lamillahu. Does that mean Allah might know, or Allah definitely knows?
Definitely. Definitely.
Allah definitely knows. Allah says, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Yeah, does it mean we might see the turning of your face towards the sky? Maybe we see it, maybe we don't. Is that possible for Allah? لا, astaghfirullah. Right? So, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. The qad there means certainly, not maybe. So in the Quran, there is a slightly different usage, which exists في أساليب العرب, which exists in the styles of the Arabs from classical Arabic. Okay, so qad, be careful, can sometimes behave slightly differently to what I'm saying here.
But in that context,
I've got an example of that here actually. In poetry, you've got this usage. Yes, go on.
Sorry. In that context, if the one above, could you have an anna before the qad? Like, for example, he studies that he may write well or something.
He studies in order that he may write well.
Yes, I guess, yeah.
Okay. Why don't you help me produce that? So say he studies.
Darasa, or he studied.
So he studied or studies?
Either, I guess. Yadrusu.
Okay. All right, let's do that. Yadrusu. Yadrusu. Right. Now, how do you say in order to?
Li.
Li. Good. So you've got your meaning with the li. There's also another way to do it. Have we done another one?
Kay.
Kay.
Kay. Good. So you could say kay in order to. All right. A very common one is actually also hatta. Hatta also means so that. And it will be followed by an imperfect verb. So say yadrusu, li, or kay, or hatta. And then what did you want to say? In order to?
That he may write better, or
that he, yes, in order to write better. So you don't need to translate the word may. Hatta yaktuba.
afdala.
Hatta yaktuba. And then how would you say better?
Afdala.
Afdala, good. Afdala, hatta yaktuba. Afdala. You could do afdala here. Yeah.
Also, you lose the qad in that context.
Yeah, the qad just means may as in possible.
Okay.
All right. Now, if you want to say in the hope that yadrusu.
لعل.
Yes, you read my mind. يدرس لعله. Say لعله يكتب أفضل. Here you say يكتب because there's nothing making it go up. Okay.
Ustad, in the previous matrix we did قد سمعت. So that was put into the perfect tense.
So that means indeed. Indeed, I
So
heard.
indeed I heard. So you would use that, but here you've got I do indeed. You could still keep it in the present tense and still have the same emphasis now?
Only in poetry. In ordinary speech, if you say قد أسمع, people understand that to mean I might hear.
Okay.
Okay. So only in poetry. So when you're reading the Qur'an, you'll see this usage where qad is used with an imperfect verb to mean indeed.
So we wouldn't use it in normal speech then. We would always follow it with a perfect tense verb if we use qad.
If you want to emphasize, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, so this is used in perfect in ordinary speech. So qad yaktubu means he may write. This is normal. This is not poetry.
But we learnt it as qad sami'tu something in one of the matrices, didn't we?
We did the perfect already.
So let me go back. So in the perfect section that I explained above, qad emphasizes the perfect verb and makes it mean indeed. All right. With the imperfect verb, it has the opposite meaning. Qad yaktubu means not he is indeed writing. It means he might write.
Okay.
Okay. This is ordinary speech, not poetry.
Okay.
The only reason I put this in is beware. Sometimes you get the opposite in poetry, where qad with an imperfect verb means not he is indeed writing. Sorry, not he might write, but he is indeed writing, or he is indeed understanding, or I am indeed understanding. Right? So with qad, you don't put anything, as we said, between qad and the verb. So you don't say qad la, or qad sa, or qad sawfa.
So,
also, yes.
Sorry, yeah, that was my question.
Yeah. Also, laqad is not used with an imperfect verb. Okay, so you don't say laqad adhabu to mean I might go. You don't do that. You just say qad adhabu, I might go. So let's just learn that one example. قد أذهب. هل تذهب إلى الحفلة? Will you go to the party? قد أذهب. I might go. All right, just learn one example of that and you'll be okay. Right, the verbal noun. What is the verbal noun? The verbal noun in very simple terms is, firstly, it's a noun, not a verb. Why is it called a verbal noun? It's a noun that refers to the concept of the action. Okay, so every verb has a noun that refers to the concept of that action. So if I say to you, I drank the water, what word would you use to refer to my action? What was I doing?
Drinking.
Drinking. Good. So drinking is the action which refers to the verb I drank, or I will drink, or I am drinking. Right? In English, it's a bit confusing because in the present tense, the verb is also drinking. I am drinking. So the verbal nouns in English have suffixes such as ing, or shin, or ment, or nus, and so on. And sometimes the verbal noun even translates into English using what we call the infinitive verb too. So if I say أحب القراءة, you could translate that as I love reading, or you could translate it as I love to read. Yeah. So in Arabic, I love to read would be أحب. Give me two ways to say I love to read based on what I just said. أحب. Good. So you could use an. أحب أن أقرأ. I love teaching you guys grammar because you already know it. أحب أن أقرأ. So that's one way to do it. You have an plus a verb, right? But you could replace an and the verb with a verbal noun. So you'd say أحب, and then the verbal noun would be the, what would be in the sentence? Al. أحب the verbal noun for قرأ is قراءة, right? So you say أحب القراءة. Right? So can you see an plus the verb? This whole sentence is in the place of the مفعول به of أحب. I like to write. This whole sentence is في محل المفعول به. Is in the mahal of the object of أحب. I like to write. To write is the thing that I like, you see. Okay, so the verbal noun in Arabic, in English, can be translated as I love reading or I love to write. Both of those renditions are possible. So let's have a look at some of the verbal nouns of the verbs we did. So you have kitabatun, julusun, means sitting. Qira'atun, reading. Fahmun, understanding. Kubrun, which is bigness, largeness in size. And for hasiba, you have hisabun, which means accounting, and husbanun, which means consideration. So those are your verbal nouns. Again, you can't work out the verbal nouns, you have to learn them. So if I give you a certain verb, there's no pattern in form 1. You can't guess or work out the pattern, the verbal noun. You have to learn the verbal noun with the verb. So when you learn the verb, you learn the perfect, you learn the imperfect, and you learn the verbal noun. There's 3 key things you need to learn.
أستاذ عندي سؤال.
تفضل.
Why they all with fathatain?
So here the reason why I put them in fatha is because I've kind of made a sentence out of it. He wrote, he's writing. What is he writing? Some writing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just made a little pattern, little drill out of this. He wrote, he's writing. What is he writing? Some writing. He sat, he's sitting. What's he doing? He sat a sitting. He read, he's reading. What's he doing? He's reading a reading. Or he read and is reading a reading. He understood, he understands, an understanding. He grew, he's growing, a bigness, a largeness. He calculated, or he considered, he's considering a consideration. Right? So I'm treating this almost like it's the object of these verbs. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean you have to always put fathahs on these, by the way. Right? So in default, this is kitabatun. Like that.
Depends what's before it, isn't it?
Depends on what's before it. That's right. Good. All right. Now, if I say to you, the verbal noun is the concept of an action, what's the gender of the verbal noun?
Nothing.
Yeah. In terms of pure concept, in terms of pure cognition, the verbal noun has no gender. You see, because it's just a pure action. Actions don't have gender, right? So in principle, the verbal noun has no gender. However, physically, you'll see that some of these are feminine, right? And some of these are masculine. So when they're used in a sentence, you treat this as though it's a feminine, and you treat that as though it's masculine for grammatical purposes. But semantically, there's no gender, of course. All right. Just beware of that. When you get to advanced grammar, there's a whole discussion on the gender of verbal nouns. What's the number of the verbal noun? Is it singular, dual, or plural?
Singular.
If I say happiness, is that singular, dual, or plural?
It doesn't have one.
Unknown.
Yeah, in concept, it doesn't have number either. No gender, no number. However, when you're using it, you can sometimes have plural. So you can have qira'atun. So you'd have readings. Qira'atun. Readings. So you've made a plural out of it. Again, you've made a physical plural, although in its pure concept, it can't have a plural because it's a diffuse concept. Okay, it's not a concrete thing. All right. So, for example,
why would you make it? Why would you make it plural?
Because in usage, sometimes we concretize the verbal noun and we make it refer to something specific. So if I say something like, there were many happinesses in my life, right? What am I doing? I'm saying there were many instances of happiness, isn't it? Yeah. So when I instantiate the verbal noun into a certain event or a certain thing, then the verbal noun will start behaving like a normal noun and have a plural. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I remember reading in the grammar book that the verbal noun has no plural, and I thought to myself, this author doesn't know what he's talking about. I can think of lots of plurals for verbal nouns. And that was me, like as a 20-year-old thinking I know better. And then I had to learn later that actually he was referring to the concept of the verbal noun, not the instantiation of it. But one learns not to be arrogant. Okay. Now, be careful. If I say sitting in the sun is beautiful, some people get confused and think and make mistakes. So they're the word sitting. They think, okay, what's the word for sitting? I am sitting, ajlisu. So what they would do is they would say, ajlisu fi shamsi jamilun. Sitting in the sun is beautiful. Is that the right thing to do?
No, because you're saying I Sat. I'm sitting.
I'm sitting. Or what about yajlisu? Yajlisu fi shamsi jamilun. Is that correct?
Jamilun should be
He is
adverb.
Huh?
I think
It
Jamilun.
will say he is sitting. He's sitting under
He
the.
is sitting in the sun is beautiful. It's nonsense. So when you say something like sitting in the sun is beautiful, you're going to use the verbal noun, right? So you're going to have ting, verbal noun. Al julusu, and you've got a noun sentence here, of course. Al julusu fi shamsi jamilun. Al fahmu sahihu shay'un jamilun. See? All right? So you'd use verbal nouns here, not verbs.
Ustad, wouldn't be better to say tahta shams or fi shams? Or
Fi shamsi is used by the Arabs. You can say tahta shamsi or fi shamsi.
Okay.
Even in English, we say under the sun or in the sun. Yeah? Although we're not physically in the sun, we're in the sunshine. Yeah. Okay. All right. So referring to this concretization of the verbal noun, this happens quite a lot actually. So when I say yaqra'ul waladul kitabata, the boy is reading the writing. Okay. Is he reading the concept of writing, or is he reading some physical writing like ink on paper?
Physical writing?
Ink on paper.
That's right. Yeah. Here he's reading some physical writing, some writing on the wall or writing in a book. So the verbal noun here, we've concretized it and given it a concrete usage. But if I say something like uhibbul kitabata, I love writing, what would that mean?
It's a master.
They're both masdar. They're both masdar. They're both technically a masdar, but one is more concrete. We've given it a concrete, more nominal, physical meaning, and we've taken it away from its verbal force. So when I use the word kitabatun to mean physical writing, writing on the writing you can see on my screen right now, that's kitabatun. That word kitabatun there has lost its verbal force. You understand what I mean? Yeah, because it's now referring to something physical like a normal noun. But if I say I love writing, I'm saying I love the concept of writing. Yeah. So there, it's still within its verbal force. All right. I've already explained this little box to you. The passive verb. All right, let's move through this quite quickly. Passive verb simply takes the active verb, and instead of saying he wrote, you remove the person who did the action and say it was written. Okay. So we'll let you read all that on your own later. So you have from fahima, you have fuhima. In the passive verb, you get this voweling pattern, dhamma, kasra, fatha in the perfect. So you have fuhima, fuhima, fuhimu, fuhimat, fuhimata, fuhimna, and it's just conjugated the same way. You're just going to have this same verb voweling pattern. So fuhima is the passive of fahima. All right, let me give you some other verbs. If I say kataba, give me the passive.
Kutiba.
Kutiba, good, it was written. Kataba, he wrote. Kutiba, it was written. Okay, if I say julisa, jalasa.
Julisa. You gave us the answer.
Right, julisa, I gave you the answer. All right. If I say qara'a, he read, how do you say it was written?
Quri'a.
Quri'a, good. Quri'a, which is in the Qur'an. Quri'a, it was written. Okay, the imperfect, from yafhamu, you just put dhamma here and fatha here. That's the voweling pattern, and then you just conjugate the whole thing the same way. So you have yufhamu, yufhaman, yufhamuna, and so on. Okay, so let me give you verbs. You give me the imperfect passive. Yaktubu, he is writing. Say it is being written.
Yuktabu.
Yuktabu, good, good. Let's have yaqtulu, he is killing. It is being killed.
Yuqtalu.
Yuqtalu, good. Yuqtalu, he is being killed. Good. There we are.
You know, we did yumna'u. So what's the active of yumna'u?
Good. The active would be, as you know, mana'a yamna'u.
Okay.
Passive, muni'a yumna'u. Okay, so the brothers of Yusuf, when they refused provisions in Egypt, they go back to their father and say, muni'na, muni'na, we have been refused. Yeah? So Yusuf is the person who did the mana'ahum Yusufu, wahum Muni'u, they were refused. Does that make sense?
We did yalzamu as well, didn't we?
Hmm?
Yalzamu.
So we didn't say yulzamu, we said yalzamu. That's
Yalzamu.
active.
That's different.
That's an active verb.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does
The passive,
that's it. How does mamnoon come into it? Is that a different word to yumno?
mamnu'un goes back to lesson 1 of this program, which is the ismul maf'ul, the passive participle. So from mana'a, you have mamnu'un, like maktubun, mafhumun. Those are the passive participles. Those are the words that refer to the thing you do the action to. All right. So if I say katabtu kitaban, I wrote a book, then al-kitabu maktubun, the book is written. Does that make sense? So you're right to point out that actually, if you think about it, you could interchangeably use the passive participle with the imperfect passive verb. In the same way that you can interchange the imperfect active verb with the active participle, right? So if I say al-waladu yaktubu, the boy is writing, I could also say al-waladu katibun, the boy is a writer. With the passive, you'd say al-kitabu yuktabu, the book is being written, or al-kitabu maktubun, the book is written. You see that? Yeah. This is why the imperfect verb is called al-fi'lul mudari'u, which means the similar verb, because it's similar to the ismul fa'ili, and the passive version is similar to the ismul maf'uli. Okay, another example. If I say huwa yajlisu, he is sitting. How do you do that with the active participle? Huwa
jalisun.
Huwa jalisun. Good. Now if I say al-kursiyu yujlasu alayhi, the chair is being sat on. You see why we need an on here? The chair is being sat upon. You can't say the chair is being sat. Even in English, you have to say sat upon. So in Arabic, you say al-kursiyu yujlasu alayhi. All right, that's the passive yujlasu, and you could use the passive participle. What's the passive participle? Majlusun. Yes, you say al-kursiyu majlusun alayhi. Yeah. I've never heard anybody ever say majlusun alayhi. Not used, but it's technically possible. Yeah, you'd say yujlasu alayhi. Yeah, reminds me of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Kursiyi yujlasu alayhi. Man jalasa ala kursiyi. You could do the Goldilocks. Next lesson, let's do Goldilocks and Three Bears in Arabic using the passive. All right, challenge. Man jalasa ala kursiyi. Wa kursiyu yujlasu alayhi. My chair has been sat upon, or is sat upon. Okay. Right, now let's see what happens when you make the verb passive. So if I say kataba al-ustadhu al-kitaba, the professor wrote the book, kataba al-ustadhu al-kitaba. When I make this passive, what I do?
Kutibu.
Kuti ba. You change these two vowels, and then the fa'il disappears. And who becomes the new fa'il? Who's doing the action of being written now? It's the book, isn't it? Yeah, so this one becomes the new fa'il, the new doer. Okay? All right, someone's asking if you can get the recording of today. You should get the recording. Please follow up with Rupon. Okay?
We didn't get last week as well, Ustaz.
Yes, if you could follow up, please. I'll message him too. Right, so we have kutiba al-kitabu. So can you see what was the object of the active verb becomes the subject of the passive verb, and the original subject disappears. Right? So in principle, you're not supposed to mention the subject. That's the reason why you're using the passive. You want to hide his identity. Instead of saying he wrote the book, you want to say the book was written by who? La adri, we don't know. So that's why they call this type of verb kutiba. In Arabic, they call it mabniyun lil majhuli. Yeah. The reason why it's called mabni is just because it's fixed on the fatha. All right, so they call it a mabni verb. That just means there's a fatha, it's fixed on the ending, which is a fatha. And then lil majhul means this person is majhul. This verb is for the majhul. Majhul means someone who's unknown, about whom someone we have jahl. All right, So let's look at the word jahala. Jahala means he was ignorant, he didn't know. So how would I say he was unknown?
مجهول جهلة.
Good. So you could either say juhila, juhila, using the verb, or you could say huwa majhulun. Okay? Does that make sense? Sorry, this thing keeps rubbing things out. I don't want it to rub out. Okay. All right, so we have kutiba al-kitabu. The book was written. Yeah. Now, in English, we use passive verbs even when we do want to mention who did it. So we might say, the book was written by Muhammad. Do we do that in English?
Yes.
Yes. In Arabic, in principle, in classical Arabic, you're not supposed to do that because the purpose of the passive verb is to hide Muhammad's identity. You don't want people to know who wrote the book. So the book was written by Hassan. In Arabic, would be rendered kataba al-kitaba hasanun. They'll just use an active verb. They won't even use a passive verb for that. Does that make sense? So in English, where we might say, the book was written by Hassan, the Arabs will just say Hassan wrote the book. Because they're wondering, you're saying Hassan, why are you using a passive? Passive is to hide the identity of Hassan. However, in modern Arabic, they have introduced something we call a modern barbarism, which is a barbaric usage, not existing in classical Arabic. They introduce sometimes the tool used to do the action with a B. So say kutiba biqalamin. It was written with a pen. Okay? Or it was written by hand. Kutiba bil yadi. However, so these two are classical, right? So if you introduce the tool used to write, to do the writing, that's fine. Okay? You still haven't mentioned who wrote it. You've mentioned what he used to write it. So that's fine. But in modern Arabic, they use the same technique to say who did it. So they say kutiba ala yadi nasi or kutiba ala yadi hasanin. That's how you'd render it was written by Hassan into modern Arabic. This is not found in classical Arabic.
Ustad, you know when we said indama yutlabu minkum, is that a modern one?
No, yutlabu means when it is demanded from you.
But you're saying minkum, so you're not hiding
But it's demanded from you. You're not demanding, someone else is demanding from you. So if somebody demands the silence from you, then silence is demanded from you, right? Are you demanding the silence, or are you
hiding the person who's demanding it?
We're hiding the person who's demanding it, yeah? You are the person from whom he's making the demand, yeah? Or of whom he's making the demand. So that's fine. So عندما يطلب منكم, when it is demanded or sought from you.
So that's just out of respect. You're saying it like that, as opposed to saying, I demand you do this.
Yeah, so please, رجاء اجلسوا, please sit, عندما يطلب منكم, when it is sought from you, rather than عندما نطلبه منكم, when we demand it from you. So that's a bit more rude. Yeah, so it is. So passives are often used for politeness, for rhetorical effect, to render politeness. Okay. Okay. So, right, and last but not least, the 10 verb forms. I'm not going to spend a very long time. I want you to just look at these yourself. What I've done here is I've done kataba yaktubu, perfect, imperfect for form 1. فهو كاتب. Then I put the ismul fa'il. Then I put your passive. Kutiba yuktabu فهو maktubun. Then the passive participle. So you've got a nice little sentence. He wrote, he's writing, so he's a writer. It was written, it is being written, so it is written. And then we've got the verbal noun, kitabatan. All right, we've done that for all the forms. Here we've got علم يعلم فهو معلم. علم يعلم فهو معلم. تعليما. This is the verbal noun form for form 2. So from form 2 onwards, the verbal nouns have the same pattern. All right. Form 3, جاهد يجاهد فهو مجاهد. جوهد يجاهد فهو مجاهد. Verbal noun. This form 3 has two versions of the verbal noun. Some form 3 verbs have both, but some only have one or the other. This one has both. So this one has jihadun and mujahadatun. Next one. Form 4, أعلم يعلم فهو معلم. The easiest one I find here is أسلم يسلم فهو مسلم. He became a Muslim. He's becoming a Muslim, so he's a Muslim. أسلم يسلم فهو مسلم إسلام. Right, so this is the verbal noun form of form 4. Form 5, تعلم يتعلم فهو متعلم. تعلم يتعلم فهو متعلم تعلما. So I'll read them out to you. Then we go to the quiz. Right. So, تفاهم يتفاهم فهو متفاهم. تفوهم يتفاهم فهو متفاهم تفاهما. There's some explanation of the meaning patterns within these verb forms in these notes as well. انكشف ينكشف فهو منكشف. انكشف ينكشف فهو منكشف انكشاف. Anybody got a friend called Kashif? Kashif? Yes, it's a well-known name. So Kashif is someone who uncovers. And they use the word Kashif also for Boy Scouts, because Boy Scouts go and scout things out and find things. So from Kashafa, we have the form 7 in Kashafa. Form 7, as you can see, is produced by just adding an in to the beginning of the root. And form 7 has a passive meaning. So in Kashafa has the same meaning as Kushifa. The active of form 7 has the same meaning as the passive of form 1. All right. Slight difference is when you say Kushifa al-amru, the matter was uncovered. The suggestion is somebody uncovered it, but we don't know who. But with in Kashafa, it's almost like spontaneous action. Right? It just became uncovered. It became revealed. It revealed itself in Kashafa. Right? So the suggestion with form 7 is the agent, there isn't an agent who uncovered it, it just became uncovered. It's self-revelation. Form 8, اجتهد يجتهد فهو مجتهد. اجتهد يجتهد فهو مجتهد اجتهادا. Please note that from form 7 onwards, these verbs don't have hamza. All right? The only verb that has a hamza at the beginning is form 4. It's 4. There we are. This one, see that? Hamza. And here, hamza. See? From form 7 onwards, you begin with hamzatul wasl. Please don't write hamzas on these or on these. There we are. No hamza. No hamza. See? Let's go to 9. 9 is just for colors, and there aren't that many of them. There's a handful of colors. One is ihmarra yahmarru. Again, no hamza. To become red. To blush. So ihmarra actually means to blush or to become red. Ihmarra yahmarru fahuwa muhmarrun. No passive. Verbal noun. Ihmirarun. For example, ihmarra wajhuhu, his face became red. So this form is used for colors and defects. Form 10, istafhama yastafhimu fahuwa mustafhimun. Ustufhima yustafhamu fahuwa mustafhamun istifhaman. In inquiry. Again, no hamza. Right. Just showing how you can make a verb sentence into a question. You can use ha, you can use a or hal, or just intonation. When you ask a negative question, you say ala and ama. You don't say halma or halla. So you have to use the hamza when you've got a question. All right, and in answer, of course, as you know, if you want to confirm, you say bala, not naam or la. Let's have a quick look at interrogative nouns. These are actually the first things we teach you in level 1. Ma, madha, mata, aina, lima, limadha, kaifa, man. And sometimes you say man, dha. Okay, you know just how we said madha. So from ma, you just add this dha. This dha is just an ishara. It's just added on to emphasize the question. So instead of saying ma, you can say madha. Instead of man, you can say man dha, and it has the same meaning. You see this in the Quran. من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه in Ayatul Kursi. Right. Kam, as you know, when you're asking kam, meaning how many, it makes the counted noun stay singular and go up. So kam kitaban means how many books. But if I say kamil kitabu, what does that mean?
How much is the
How much is the book? Good. So this means how many books? Kam kitaban. Kamil kitabu. Bima'na, how much is the book? And finally, we have ayyu, which is used also for questions, which means which. And as you know, it works in an indefinite idafa. Ayyu kitabin qara'ta. Which book did you read? This brings us to the end. Right, let's now go to our quiz. Are you ready? All right, let's start off. Okay, session 5. Right, number 1, Bismillah. Right, so we have here maridtu. Maridtu. What's that?
Perfect verb.
Perfect verb, good. It's of the form fahima, isn't it? So if I say marida, he became ill, what would the imperfect be? Would it be yamradu, yamridu, yamrudu?
Yamridu.
Yamradu.
Remember I said 99% of the time, so whoever said that, you're thinking of hasiba yahsibu. That's a rare instance, that's like 1%. If you want to take a guess, yeah, then you go with the 99%. So you say marida yamradu. Whenever in the perfect you have a kasra, you put a fatha in the imperfect. Marida, so the imperfect is yamradu. So if I say wa idha amradu fahuwa yashfin, and when I am ill, he cures me, if that were imperfect. Fahuwa, so he, yashfi ni. So what does yashfi mean? He cures, good, and then there's a ni. And this ni here, anybody guess? What's missing here?
There's a ya missing.
Yeah, we dropped that ya. Ni. This noon is that noonul wiqaya, that noon of protection, that protects this verb from that ya. And in Arabic, in certain styles, you can drop that ya and leave the noon there with a kasra to indicate that it was there. Okay, so that's a stylistic flourish. Let's have a look at the next one. وَيَسْتَنْبِئُونَكَ. وَيَسْتَنْبِئُونَكَ. Which verb form is that?
Form 10.
Form 10. Good, well done. Istanba'a, yastanbi'u, from the root naba'a, which means naba'un means news. Yastanbi'unaka, they seek news from you, they inquire. Yeah. So okay, so yastanbi'una, that's the verb. What's the ka?
The attached pronoun.
Good, attached pronoun. Here it's the object. Yeah, they inquire you, meaning they make inquiry to you. What do they inquire? Ahaqqun hu. Is it true? What do we have here? What type of sentence?
Noun sentence.
Good. Where's the mubtada?
Ahaqqu.
Huwa is the mubtada. Well done. And you can tell haqqun is your indefinite word. We've switched the mubtada and the khabar. We did this last week or the week before. Remember that? Where in question you can switch them around. You say ahaqqun huwa, meaning ahwa haqqun. Well remembered, guys. And then qul, e means yes. This is a yeah. E means yes. Wa rabbi, wow is the waw al qasam. This is an oath. So wa rabbi means by my Lord. Innahu lahaqqun. This is another jumla ismiya, noun sentence, introduced by the inna. And this lam, do you remember what this lam was called?
Lam
of emphasis.
Lam of emphasis.
Yeah.
Lam al tawqeed. Tawqeed is the Arabic word for emphasis. Well done, guys. We're getting more and more into some of the detail. Let's go to the next one. Okay. فَإِنْ آمَنُوا. آمنوا. آمنوا. آمن يؤمن. آمن يؤمن فهو مؤمن. Which form? Form 4. Good. آمن آمنوا. So you've got a perfect plural verb there, right? بمثل, and if they believe in the like of what you believe, what you have believed, بمثل ما آمنتم به فقد. What do we have here? What does the qad here mean?
As a noun, indeed.
Sure, they have indeed, because you hear the verb is perfect, yeah? So they have indeed ihtadaw. Which verb form is that? Ihtada, yahtadi. 8, good. Yeah, you can tell by the telltale ta here in the middle after the first root letter. Ijtahada, yajtahidu, ihtada, yahtadi. Faqad ihtadaw, they have been rightly guided. Wa in tawallaw, and if they turn away, tawalla means to turn away. Which form? 2 would be walla, wallaw.
Oh, 5.
5. فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ. They are nothing but discord, division. Now, this is one of the longest words in the Quran. In fact, maybe I think it is the longest word. Right, let's break this down. What's the fa?
So.
So, good. So that's one word. Sa. Sa is the future participle. Yakfi. Yakfi is the verb here, yeah? Yakfi means to be sufficient. Ka.
Like?
Ka is you.
Yeah.
And hum is?
Them.
We've got a rare instance here. We've got a very rare instance where you've got 2 attached pronouns on the same verb. And both are objects, 2 objects. So, Allah is the fa'il. Allah, so Allah will be sufficient for you against them. Yeah, in English you have to say against, because the second object in English is indirect. In Arabic, with the verb yakfi, you can have 2 direct objects and they could actually both be attached pronouns. Right?
Ustad, in this su'al fi ihtadaw, so this is form 8. So the dal has a fatha on it. Why is that?
Because in the normal form it would be ijtahadu, isn't it? You'd have a dhamma on there. But because there's a weak letter at the end, some phonetic changes happen. Because this is a weak verb and the letter at the end is a it's ihtada yahtadi, isn't it? It's a ya from the root hadya, hadaya. So because it's a weak letter at the end, those verbs behave slightly differently. So we have to also learn them separately. I've got all of these in verb tables. You know how I've got the 10 verb forms I've shown you today? I've got all of those 10 again for verbs that begin with a waw, like wasala, yasilu, verbs that have a waw in the middle, like kana, yakunu, verbs that have a waw or a ya at the end, like hada, yahdi, right? Then I've got the doubled ones, like marra, yamurru, and yeah, those are the main ones. So we've got four, maybe 5 more of those tables. So, but you have to learn the main one first, the sound verbs that are not weak or doubled. Okay. Once you've got really grasped those, and you're a table person. If you're not a table person, don't ask me for the table because it will just scare you. If you're a table person, if you've got the right table brain, it works for you, then I don't mind. I can give you those. But they're not for popular consumption. They can harm you if you're trying to do them on your own and you don't have the right sort of table brain. If you're not a tabular learner, and that's fine. Different people learn different ways. Some of you are contextual learners. You know, some of you need a context in order to learn something. Some of you can learn out of context, can learn abstract things. Not everybody is the same. Different brains are wired differently. Right.
So just going back to that you said Allah is sufficient against them. How would we know that the ka means against? It wouldn't be Allah is sufficient for them.
The ka doesn't mean against.
Oh, okay.
So the meaning is فَسَيَكْفِيكَ Allahu alayhim.
So Allah is sufficient.
So you could do it with the alayhim, or whatever preposition would go with it with this. Kafa. Maybe a B. Yes, فَسَيَكْفِيكَ Allahu bihim or alayhim.
عليهم.
Yes, you either say bihim or alayhim. If you want to separate the second object, right? So there's a meaning of bi or ala in the middle of between the ka and the hum. That's what I'm saying. The ka means you. Allah, so Allah is sufficient for you. Even in
For
English,
you,
you've got to put, you've
yeah.
got to put a for here. So
Yeah,
here
that's what I was
there's a
trying to
meaning of a li, laka,
Yeah.
laka alayhim. You see? So there's a
Yeah.
meaning of laka alayhim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ustad, this is the longest joined construct, but I think the longest one is فَأَسْتَقِيمَكُمُوهُ. فَأَسْتَقِينَكُمُوهُ. It's in Surah Hajar, verse number 22.
فأسقيناكم
فأسقينا. Yes. Yes. Let's find it. Yes. This is Surah Al-Hijr. So we have وأرسلنا الرياح لواقح, and we sent the winds that pollinate. فأنزلنا من السماء ماء, and we sent down from the sky water. فأسقيناكم, and see that wow there. فأسقيناكم. That wow we said that has to be introduced when you have a attached pronoun who. فأسقيناكم, who. That's the meaning, and the wow is the lubricator there. فأسقيناكموه, and we watered you with it. Again, in English, you've got to put the word with in before the it. Yeah, we provided you with water with it. That's the meaning. فأسقيناكموه. All right, let's move on. We've got quite a few more pages to go through. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ فَوْقَهُمْ صَافَّاتٍ. There is a verb here. I'm not going to focus on that. Let's look at this one. What verb is this? يَقْبِضْنَ.
Third person, like feminine.
Third person feminine plural. They qabd, they hold, they grasp, referring to the birds. Yeah, so when they fly, they have a state when they're safat, they've got their wings spread out, and then wayaqbidna, and they embrace wayaqbidna. Ma yumsikuhunna, amsaka yumsiku. Which form?
Form 4.
Form 4. Good. Amsaka yumsiku. What's the verbal noun?
Imsakun.
Imsakun. Good. Does that remind you of Ramadan?
Yes.
What's imsak?
The
It's when you stop eating, right? Because amsaka means to grab, hold. So when you stop eating, you withhold, literally withhold yourself from eating. That's called imsak. So that's the verb amsaka. Ma yumsikuhunna illa rahman. Nobody holds them in the air. Hunna, this is a personification. Allah is treating the birds as though they're female humans.
it's similar word where it says be quiet as well. Omsiko, something like that.
Yeah, so if you restrain yourself from speaking, this would be imsak anil kalam. Yeah. So sa'umsiku means I'll restrain, I'll withhold from myself from speaking. It can also be referred, it can also be used to withhold speech. In fact, remember that fasting, traditionally before Islam, there was fasting from speaking, wasn't there? Maryam alayhi salam, she says, Inni nadhartu lirrahmani sawma. Sawm means fasting from speech. Siyam means fasting from food. Okay. Let's move on. This is an interesting one. This is a surah you all know, Surah Al-Qadr. I'm interested in this verse here. Right. Is this a perfect verb or an imperfect verb?
Imperfect. Form 5.
You know this one, don't you?
No, I can't just see it.
All right. So what's wrong with it then?
Looks like a perfect.
Okay. If I just had a fatha here,
it should have another dot.
If it was tanazzala, would that be perfect or imperfect?
That would be perfect.
Would be perfect.
Perfect. Good. What's the imperfect of tanazzala? So here there's something missing. There's the tatanazzalu, because malaikatu will be treated as feminine, right? Or if you treat them as masculine, you'd say yatanazzalu. So either yatanazzalu or tatanazzalu is missing here. right? So in Arabic, again, this is one of the styles of the Arabs. With the form 5 verb, they sometimes drop that prefix. So this is not a perfect verb. I was confused by this for quite a long time until I learned this. So it's تتنزل or يتنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. تنزل, of course, means to descend. Nazzala, form 2, means to make something else descend, make something else come down. So form 5 generally gives you the reflexive of form 2. It's useful to learn some of the relationships that I've explained in the notes. The form 5 gives you the reflexive of form 2. أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن. أأنتم أنزلتموه. What do you notice here that we learned today?
Added one.
This wow we've added to the tum. So anzaltum, you sent down. So did you send it down from the clouds? Am nahnul munzilun, or are we the senders down? Right? So this wow is that lubricator wow for that masculine plural second person verb. Anzaltum. Anzala yunzilu. What form verb?
Form
4.
Or verbal noun.
Inzalun.
Inzalun, good. This is the mental agility I want, right? You say, right, the verbal noun anzala yunzilu, fahuwa munzilun, unzila yunzalu, fahuwa munzalun, verbal noun, inzal. Okay. Wa kullu shay'in fa'aluhu. What's this? Perfect verb, plural, third person. And before we added the who, what did we have to remove from here?
Alif.
The alif. See that? We've removed the alif. Good. It's the next one. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ma lakum. What's wrong with you? We've done that, haven't we? Ma lakum, ma bikum. Idha qila. Qila. So when a verb is hollow, when it has a waw in the middle, and you make it passive, you don't say quila. You say qila. Qila. So this is a passive of qala. Qila. Right. This is a really interesting verb. إِذَا قِيلَ لَكُمْ انْفِرُوا. This is obviously a command. Go forth. When it is said to you, go forth, فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, in the way of Allah, this is a command to fight. So when it's said to you, go and fight in the way of Allah, إِثَّاقَلْتُمْ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. What do you think is the root of this? Can you see the root letters? Anybody?
Thaqala.
Good. Thaqala. What does thaqil mean?
Heavy.
Heavy. Good. So this is actually a very interesting verb. It's an alternative version of form 6. All right. So form 6 from thaqala would be
تثاقل.
تثاقل. Good. تثاقل يتثاقل فهو متثاقل. تثوقل يتثاقل فهو متثاقل تثاقلا. So the verb noun is تثاقل. Yeah. This is the verb تثاقل. Sometimes this verb can be rendered as إثاقل. You drop the ta and you add a hamzatul wasl and you double the tha. إثاقل. Yeah. That's also form 6. It's the same verb, but just slightly different version of it. You say إثاقلتم إلى الأرض, that you weigh down heavy onto the earth. So when you're told to go forth and fight, you're so frightened and so averse to going forth and fighting with Allah that you become like lead weights back to the ground. Can you see the rhetorical impact of إثاقلتم? Doesn't that sound heavy? As opposed to تثاقلتم, which sounds much lighter. Yeah. So there's a very obvious reason for the choice of this word here. Yes, Maliha.
Is that rendering just for this particular verb?
No.
So, can you do it to any form 6 verb? Like
Can you do it to any form 6 verb? Answer is I actually don't know. You only really see it in poetry and the Qur'an.
Okay.
So I actually don't know the answer whether you could do it. Can you do it for tafahama? Iffahamna. Never heard it.
Okay.
In fact, that's a good question. Let me ask my own study buddy. You know, I have a study buddy. My teacher was a flatmate. He's a master of Arabic. So
Thank you.
Sometimes I ask him, Paula, he's so patient with me. I ask him really easy questions. I should know. Be done for any okay. Go down. يا أيها الذين آمنوا. آمنوا is a perfect verb. آمنوا إذا قمتم. That's a hollow verb. So we don't say قومتم from قوم. We say قام يقوم قمتم. You stood. If you stand, إلى الصلاة. You stand to pray or to the prayer. فاغسلوا, that's a command. Wash, it's a verb. وجوهكم, what's this one? فاغسلوا وجوهكم, what's that?
Object.
Object, good. وأيديكم, and your hands. That goes up because it's conjuncted to this, right? إلى المرافق, to the elbows. وامسحوا, and wipe. وامسحوا برؤوسكم, and wipe with your heads. This is initially a very strange construct. This doesn't say wipe your heads. It says wipe with your heads. What is the tool you use to wipe your head?
Hands.
Your hands.
Your hand, right? So technically this verse isn't saying wipe your head with your hands. It's saying wipe your hands with your your hand with your head, right? Because if the verse said وَامْسَحُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ, that would create an obligation to wipe the whole of your head.
There's been a lot of conversation about this, hasn't there?
Say again?
This verse has had a lot of
yeah, so there's a difference in the madhahib in relation to this ba. And the question is, then how much of your head is it obligatory to wipe? Because clearly there is an obligation because there's a command. So what does the ba mean? And essentially what it means is, if you take it literally, wipe with your head. So what do you have to wipe? Wipe your hand, right? So some people, the Hanafis said, well, okay, if you have to wipe your hand, then the space of your hand is about 1/4 of your head. So you can try this yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If you place 2 hands there, one on top, one at the back, if you had 4 hands, you could cover your whole head. Yeah. So the Hanafis say it's obligatory to wipe the space of your hand, approximately 1/4 of your head. Okay, and there are other opinions as well. One opinion being that the bi has a meaning of min, wamsahu min ru'usikum, and there are other examples in the Arabic language where the bi does have the word meaning of min. So if I say to you, eat of that pizza, and you take up one little bit of cheese and eat it, have you obeyed my command?
Yes.
Yeah. If I say kulu min dhalika al-pizza, kulu min, so the word min is fulfilled if you do one small bit. So I think it's the Malikis who say that if you just wipe one hair, then the command is fulfilled because the bi here means min. Okay. And there's another opinion that the ba here is for emphasis. And so the actual meaning is wamsahu ru'usakum. I believe those are the Shafi'is or the Hanbalis, I can't remember. But they believe you have to wipe the whole head, because the ba is lit-tawkid. It doesn't have semantic value in the verse. It has emphatic value. So their opinion is that you have to wipe the whole head. And so can you see there is rahma in that disagreement? This ba isn't there by mistake. Allah could have said wamsahu ru'usakum, knowing fully well that the ulama will disagree on the meaning of the ba. This is the verse, right? So it's not a mistake. If anybody believes this is a mistake, then they are not a believer. Okay, so we have to believe this is Allah's word. The ba is part of Allah's word, and Allah knows that Muslims will disagree on the meaning of this ba, and therefore have different rulings in relation to wudu. And so therefore it must follow that the madhabs were intended by Allah. They're not a mistake. Right. Question. Somebody had a question.
I think the
The Malik is, sorry, yeah, the Shafi'i is one part, the Malik is the whole, so I got it the wrong way around. Okay. Okay, here. وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا simple past tense verb في الزبور من بعد الذكر أن الأرض يرثها, that the earth يرثها. So where's the fa'il of يرثها?
Yeah.
The fa'il, the doer. Who's doing the verb? Who's doing the action of yarithu?
Is it Ibadi? No.
Good. Ibadi. They're the people who are going to inherit the earth. My righteous servants will inherit the earth. This was written in the Psalms of David. Blessed be the righteous, for they shall inherit the earth.
The fa'il. The fa'il is, it's written as a noun, right?
This word here is a fa'il. Yeah, it doesn't have a
Why
dhamma.
does it go up? Okay, yeah.
It doesn't go up. This ya is mine, my servants.
Okay.
Ibadi. Normally you'd have a sukoon on the ya. Sometimes you're allowed to put a fatha as well. Ibadiya. So you have ibadiya. This is forced to have a kasra because of the ya. Okay. Alam tara, did you not see? Kayfa daraba Allahu mathalan. Allah struck an example. Fa'il maf'ulun bihi. Fa'il maf'ulun bihi. Straightforward. وَكَانَ يَأْمُرُ أَهْلَهُ بِالصَّلَاةِ. What do we have here? كَانَ يَأْمُرُ.
What does ya'muru mean?
Continuous.
Amara means to command.
He was
Past
commanding.
continuous. Good. Past continuous. He used to command his family with prayer, to pray. كَانَ يَأْمُرُ, past continuous. Maliha, this explains your point. So when you have the past continuous, you don't take this verb up. It stays in default. كَانَ يَأْمُرُ. But this kana here makes the khabar of a noun sentence go up. Kana mardiyan.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. وَإِذْ زَيَّنَ, what form?
Two.
زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ. Shaitan decorated for them, literally made seem fair. أَعْمَالَهُم, object. وَقَالَ, and he said, لَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. لَا غَالِبَ is like لَا رَيْبَ لَا بَأْسَ. There is no vanquisher above you, of you. Al-yawma. So Shaitan reassured them, nobody will defeat you today. مِنَ النَّاسِ وَإِنِّي جَارٌ لَكُمْ. While I am your neighbor. Shaitan promised them, I'm with you. فَلَمَّا تَرَاءَتِ الْفِئَتَانِ. What form? تَرَاءَت.
Form 6.
6. Good. From ra'a, from ara, I see, ra'aytu, I saw. Form 6 would be tara'a, yatara'a. Yeah, so when the two groups made eye contact, when they saw each other, falamma tara'at. Form 6 has this meaning of mutuality, doing it to each other. All right, so tafahama means they mutually understood, they had a mutual understanding. Tawasala means they communicated with each other, they connected with each other. Tawasala.
Is that a dual or not?
This is feminine because the verb stays singular before the dual or the plural subject. Yeah.
Okay,
so this word is dual. Yes. Al-fi'atani is dual. That's right. So when the two groups saw each other, nakasa. Nakasa means to slink away, to shrink away. Who did the nakasa? Who ran away when the two parties saw each other? Who's the one who reassured them here? I'm going to be with you. Shaitan. Yeah, he broke his promise. He ran away with his tail between his legs. Nakasa ala aqibayhi. He slunk away upon his heels. Aqib means heels. Waqala, and he said, Inni bari'un minkum. I am absolved of you. I have no responsibility for you. Even though he reassured them there. Inni ara ma la tarawna. I see. What do you think made him run away? What did he see?
Angels.
He saw the angels.
He saw the angels coming down and he thought, whoops, yeah, I'm not with these guys. Inni ara, I see, ma la tarawna, what you don't see. Inni akhafullah. So even shaitan fears Allah, or he claims to. Inni akhafullah. I fear Allah. So this verb khafa is khafa yakhafu. It's a hollow verb like qala and kana. Yeah. It's like nama yanamu. When we said yanamu, this one is like nama yanamu. Khafa yakhafu. It's got an alif in the imperfect. Right. I'm not sure we'll get through all of these. We're about halfway through, and some people need to go. So those of you who can stay, I'm happy to take you through these. And those of you who want to go, I think we've done enough. We've really done a lot of verb sentence today. If you do have time later, you can look through the videos. If you don't, that's fine. We've done quite a lot, and that covers everything. Those of you who do want to stay, I'm happy to carry on maybe for another 10 minutes. Let's see how many we get through. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ قَالَ, of course, is your verb. And then he said, what did he say? Inni. Remember the qala, he said that has to come with an inna. Remember that? You can't say qala anna, you have to say qala inna. Inni ja'ilun. What do we have here?
Noun sentence.
A noun sentence. Good. With an ismul fa'il. I am a maker. Fil ardi khalifatan. The ismul fa'il has a verbal force. So khalifatan is the object, the fact maf'ulun bihi of ja'ilun. I am making upon the earth a vice regent.
So the verbal noun makes khalifa then go up.
Khalifatan go up. Yeah, it's the object. So when you create
The
a verbal noun,
nouns have objects.
oh sorry, this is not a verbal noun. This is ismul fa'il. It's an active participle.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Arabs consider the ismul fa'il, the ismul maf'ul, and the verbal noun to have verbal capabilities. Yeah, they're a bit like the Avengers. The three nouns that are actually Avengers. Yeah, so they're mutants. They can mutate and behave like verbs. Okay, so this is an example. When you use it in a noun sentence, say inni ja'ilun, then it has a meaning of present tense. Sorry, it has meaning of future. So if I say ana fa'ilun dhalika, that means I will do that ghadan, tomorrow. All right. If you add the lam of emphasis here, then it brings it back into the present. Inni laja'ilun would mean I am doing it now. If it was inni laja'ilun, the angels would have been looking around saying, where is he? Where's your creation that you're making now? Okay. Right? So because it's inni ja'ilun without the lam, it's about the future. Of course, future in relation to the angels, because time does not relate to God. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifatan. There are other situations where the verbal noun can have an object, and I believe we are going to do that in level 7.
Okay.
How exciting. Or is it level 8? I can't remember. But soon, inshallah, we will do verbal nouns with objects.
You do it in level 7, Ustad.
Level 7. Sumaya is here to remind me. Level 7, yes. Give me an example, Sumaya.
Ya salam. تناولتنا تتناول يا سلام. I can't remember that phrase. We do eating the subject.
تناولك. Good. Your dealing or your treatment of the subject. Remember that?
نعم. تناولك المرضى.
تناولك الأمر or yeah. So what? Let's use a simpler verbal now. So if I say
we did like eating of food. We did that.
Oh, did we do that? Your eating of the food. Okay.
Yeah.
So we say
I like eating of food.
We did it as a idafa.
Yeah. So whenever the key thing here is that when the verbal noun is in an idafa, it becomes an avenger. Right? Remember that the verbal noun in the idafa becomes an avenger. Right? Because I'm now verb man. Yeah, it's got a V on its chest. So you'd say akluka. Now this verbal noun, because it's in an idafa, has a verbal force. Now I can say you're eating of the food. Instead of saying lit ta'ami, I can say at-ta'am. At-ta'ama. You see that? You're eating of the food. So at-ta'ama there is the object of the verbal noun. And the ismul fa'il can have an object when it's used with a tanween, like this. Yeah. I could express this differently. I could, if I use an idafa, I could do this. Inni ja'ilu khalifatin. All right, we've got an idafa there. It's not doing the job of a verb there. Same here. If I say aklu ta'ami, then how would I say from you or by you?
Laka. Abika.
Or minka, so I do min. Yeah, from you. The eating of the food from you. Yeah, eating of the food from you. There's no verbal force there. All right, but here you've got a verbal force. Akluka at-ta'ama. Or aklul waladi at-ta'ama. The boy's eating of the food. All right, let's do one more. Let's close out for the day. Let's go to the end, to the last one. The rest of them you can do on your own. Let's do the last two. Okay. Wala tahsabanna. This noon here is called noon tawkid, the noon of emphasis, and it's added to imperfect verbs to emphasize them. So tahsabu, remember we did hasiba? Yeah, so tahsabu is the imperfect, and we add this noon, tahsabanna. That noon is just an emphasis. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا. What do we have here, guys?
Passive.
Passive. Good. قُتِلُوا, they were killed. Do not believe, do not think, do not consider those who were killed في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء, nay, they are alive. عند ربهم يرزقون. What do we have here?
That's passive as
Another
well.
passive.
Plural passive.
Plural passive. Good. And last but not least, أذن.
Passive.
Passive. Yeah. So أذن للذين. It was permitted for those للذين يقاتلون. قاتل يقاتل. Which form? Three. Good. But this is what? Is this active or passive?
Active.
Passive.
Passive. يقا. Look at the telltale signs. يقا. So it's قاتل يقاتل فهو مقاتل. قتل يقاتل. يقاتل. You see? It's passive imperfect. يقاتلون. It was permitted for those who are fought against. بأنهم ظلموا. Because they were
Passive, yeah.
they were oppressed. ظُلِمُوا. So it's got three passives here in quick succession. All right. I hope you enjoyed this. You enjoy it?
Definitely.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Inshallah. All right. So we have another treat, an extra bonus bonanza for you next week, a sixth lesson. And I'm going to decide what to do on that lesson between now and then. I'll try and make it fun.
Ustad, you said we would do weak verbs.
You want to do some weak verbs next week?
We don't have to. We can do anything.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Please express if you have any preferences, what you want to do next week. I was going to do a bit of i'rab. We could just make it a motley. So do a bit of i'rab, very simple i'rab, and some weak verbs. Yeah, and those of you who want all of those verb tables, the weaks and the hollows and the doubles and all of that, let me know.
Yes, please. That really helps.
All right.
So what was chapter 5?
Say again?
What was chapter 5? Because today we did chapter 4, right?
Today, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm going to decide what to do next week based on your votes. So,
I think I'll second Maria's.
weak verbs. We'll do some weak verbs. All right. Let's do some weak verbs. So weak verbs are of three types. You've got the weak letter at the beginning, the weak letter in the middle, the weak letter at the end. It's kind of telling me you want me to go through all those tables with you.
We also have the doubled one as well, which we've probably never.
And doubled, yeah. You just want to do the lot, right?
Go through the tables. We'll know how to use them.
Yeah. Okay. For your reference. Okay. So those of you who find them daunting, don't try to memorize them all in one go. use them as a source of reference. So if something comes up, you know where to look it up. You see, it's a bit like a dictionary. All right. So this is my sort of health warning that comes with it. Use it for those of you who are overwhelmed by tables. Don't try to don't try to internalize all of it in one go. Use it like a dictionary until you get familiar with it, and then when you're happy with bits of it, and then you start creating you drop anchors in different places through the things you look up. And after a while, you just sort of naturally internalize it. And those of you who are table learners, you're welcome to memorize them all in one day.
There are lots of tables.
There are lots. Oh, Maliha knows about this, right? She's been there before. All right, there are lots of tables. So we're going to have probably around 20, 25 pages, just of tables. So next week's going to be just zooming through these tables. That's what, and I'll do a bit of Arab to make it spicy. All right. جزاكم الله خيرا. قولوا معي سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. زينب عندك سؤال.
نعم عندي سؤال. ولكن it's not related to the lesson, but you know in the Quran the word the name of Allah, it never has a standing fatha, whereas any other like letter that's pronounced in the same way always has a standing fatha. What's the reason for that?
There's reasons for this. The Quran has its own orthography.
It's just got one single fatha.
You find with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the alif of the word ism is not written, and ar-Rahman, the alif after the meme, is not written. So the Quran has its own written script, if you like. It's just traditional. Okay.
So can I ask a philosophical question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, why not have some philosophy at 9 p.m? Go on.
You're mentioning about the shaitan, and I'm just wondering, because we always generally say that he will be destined for Jahannam. Given that he has aqidah and he's witnessed Allah, so to speak, and he essentially believed in the Shahada, would he not be destined eventually for heaven?
But there are verses in the Quran that say he will be damned. Right, so we take those as they stand.
It's potentially even worse that he's seen it and he's still arrogant and so forth.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think what she's saying is, if you have Iman during this life, then technically you're not a disbeliever, you're a disobeyer, and you will burn in hell for millions of years, but you'll eventually come out and go to heaven.
I thought that was
that's a contention. That is a contentious discussion. I think it's a bit late to go through all of that now, but the position of Ahlul Sunnah is that he will be forever in hell, and there are reasons for that and evidences for that, and let's take that offline if you want to discuss it more. All right?
Okay, quick question, Ustad. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
You know, when we say, for example, we say Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Who is that who referring to? How do we know it's referring to Umar and not Khattab?
Because that's the usage.
So is it like because we know from the intention, or is there any other way of, sorry?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And sometimes when we say Ibn Umar, we say radiyallahu anhuma for both of them.
Yeah, I understand that. But if it was just who, so we don't know which one.
Yeah, if we didn't have the context, we might not know, but we'd have to go back to how people use the language. So if somebody says someone's name and then they say their father's name, you're mainly talking about the son, not the father. The father there is effectively his surname. Yeah. So because he's the main protagonist of your sentence, you'd expect the references to be to him, unless you have a reason to believe otherwise. Yeah. All right. قولوا معي سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد
على سيدنا محمد
وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم لا ننسى أن نصلي على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.